You are listening to the Lichatchila Riber podcast.
מי מחזיק את האמת ביד ומי מחליט שהוא רק הנכון והצודק? מי נתן לנו את הבחירה לחיות ולהיות בצד שמחפש אמת?
Welcome to another episode of the Lichatchila Riber podcast. Excited to be here. We have a very special guest, Baruch, Rumann. He's going to share with us a crazy story. Baruch, how are you?
Baruch Hashem. Chaim, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for having me on the Lichatchila Riber podcast.
My pleasure. I'll just give an introduction how I found Baruch. I was a counselor at YSB, and on Shabbos, he had tons of kids which were, had to do something on Shabbos. I had this idea, let's go to Tiferes, guys, and let's get some good stories out of them. Let's bring with them. I'm sure there's some crazy stories, and we found you. And it was Pashut maxed out. There was every week there was like 70 kids could join. It was the hottest item on the list. Everyone maxed it out, and the guys had a great time. And I figured you're a perfect guy for this podcast, to real transformation, real crazy radical shifts in your life. And yeah, that's what we're here for tonight. So take us from the beginning. Where you're from?
Yes, please. I'm from Houston, Texas. I grew up, born and raised in what's called the NASA area of Houston. It's really right outside of Houston. That's where the Johnson Space Center is. My father is a NASA engineer, aerospace engineer of 40 years. I myself have worked for NASA for 10 years and for the Department of Defense for 5 years. I currently work for the United States Air Force. So growing up in Houston, Texas, really in a little town called League City, my experience being born to a mother who is a psychologist and a father who's an engineer, so I didn't get away with much growing up. But being born in Texas, there's a lot of cultural aspects that really are, you're born with Jewish values in a lot of ways. Growing up, now that I've come to know much more, I never realized really how much Chabad was involved in my life, even before I had ever met Chabad or ever heard of the Rebbe. For example, I remember how impactful and important a moment of silence was in elementary school. Even it left a big impact on me. In addition, my mother and my family, basically my Judaism was Hanukkah, and Hanukkah, as I had come to find out, was not really a publicized or really a holiday that was so well known, even amongst American Jewry. Of course, people knew what it was, but it wasn't widely celebrated. It wasn't the production that it is today. And that really was shifted when the Lubavitcher Rebbe made the global push to have a celebration of Hanukkah worldwide. And this was something that was my entire Judaism and identity was built around Hanukkah. That was the main mitzvah I knew about, obviously, other than honoring my father and mother, loving another person, and giving charity, tzedakah. This was basically the entirety of my Jewish upbringing. My two younger sisters, as well with me, growing up in the public school system, and I had sought meaning in many different areas. I grew up playing tennis, involved in mixed martial arts from a very young age, as well as being involved in orchestra. And eventually, when I got to middle school, I had met a few other Jewish people. It was some of the first Jewish people I had met other than my own family. And in middle school, eventually around 6th, 7th grade, I had heard about people having bar and bas mitzvahs. And I asked, what is this bar and bat mitzvah? What is that? I was told that it's where they learn how to read from the Torah. They have a party and people give them a lot of money. And I said, hey, that sounds great. Sign me up. I would love to have a bar mitzvah. So I went back home to my parents and I said, I want to have a bar mitzvah. My parents took one look at me and said, nice try. No, we're not going to do that. And I pushed.
Are they Russian?
No, my father is actually from Monterrey, Mexico, and my mother, she is from California of German-Hungarian descent, and she grew up in Mexico City. Both of my parents came to the States for university, and they met at Texas A&M University, where I had really delved into my Yiddishkeit. Both of my parents, even though Baruch Hashem, I'm Jewish because of my mother, were familiar with their own Judaism, but again, besides Hanukkah or the mitzvahs that are, so to speak, built into culture, honoring one's father and mother and the like, I wasn't really aware, for example, about Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah or Sukkot or Pesach. I didn't know about, tefillin or tzitzis or mezuzahs. I do recall that there were boxes on the walls, on the doorposts, but there was no scroll inside of it. It was just a box, So
Only the food holidays. You're saying Hanukkah,
well,
Purim, like
it was
good food.
just Hanukkah. It was just Hanukkah.
Okay,
Yeah, I
guess you
didn't
guys
know
like
about
donuts.
yeah, I didn't know about Purim. I got sufganiot, and that was like my Judaism. And really maybe not even sufganiot. It was really just like the chocolate coins, to be able to play dreidel. And so my mother actually did make a big deal out of Hanukkah, and this was something that I was very proud about. To be a Jew, my mother would come to my public school and make a Hanukkah demonstration for the kids, and it was something that I really took a lot of pride in. And listen, even a single mitzvah represents the entirety of the Torah. And for me, this was my koch growing up, and until I had asked my parents to have a bar mitzvah, at which point they said no. But I pushed and I pushed and I asked and I said, I really want the party. I really want the money. But of course, that's the externality. The inner reason, as I'm looking back on it on my life, is because I really wanted the expression of my soul, and I wanted to connect. So I eventually convinced my parents to enroll me in the conservative synagogue. And when I had gone, it's a little bit different. They put tefillin on my sister and not on me. But but when I went, I learned how to read Hebrew. The goal was to be conversational. I never really learned to speak Hebrew. However, I learned a lot of the basics, and I eventually learned how to lane the parsha kiseitze for my bar mitzvah. Now, kiseitze has nothing to do with my birthday week. It was just a parsha we picked, and
Shortest one, is it?
kiseitze lemachama.
No.
Kiseitze. Yes.
Was it the shortest one? Is that the shortest mafia or something? No.
No,
No,
it was just I think I had gone through I had gone through the maybe kiseitze is a shorter portion.
Whatever. I don't think the shortest, but anyways, but that was, I guess, the shortest one around the whatever.
Probably why it was picked. That thank you for bringing that out. That's probably, but it's packed with it may be short, but it's packed with a lot of important mitzvahs. Parenthetically, actually, just today, I had heard about my family doing the mitzvah of sending away the mother bird, which Kiseitze talks about. So there's all kinds of reasoning why Hashgacha Pratis Hashem leads us in a certain direction. So I linked Parshas Kiseitze. They clapped for me, and we had a party, and I got the money and everything. And then they said, your formal Jewish education is done. You've completed it. And I'm like, wait a second. I just got here. Well, university, people go to further their education in secularism, and people can go and get a PhD, and there's no end to the level of learning that one can do in many subjects. Isn't Judaism the same? I had asked. And I was told, no, this is really it. Once you have accomplished the bar mitzvah, really the only other thing to do is, to get married or become a rabbi if that's what you want to do. And so I said, there's got to be something more. And eventually they said, well, if you really want to, you can teach our pre-K and kindergarten classes and learn with them Chumash and Navi. So I did. We went over Joseph and the King of Dreams, Jonah and the whale, and stories of the like. And after 3 years of being involved in the conservative synagogue, it really became my life outside of school, in addition to my other extracurriculars. And I really made myself a home in my Judaism that I was comfortable in. Now, I still didn't, celebrate many of the holidays. I would go maybe to Yom Kippur services or Rosh Hashanah services, but I'd never heard of Passover. I'd never heard of Sukkot. I didn't know about davening Shachris Mincha Ma'ariv. I knew about Shabbat, and I knew about saying the Shema, but I didn't know what Shabbat meant. I didn't know how to keep the Shabbat. I just know that on Friday night we go to the synagogue and Baruch Hashem, that was my Yiddishkeit. So after 3 years, I turned 18, and my parents tell me, okay, it's time for you to go to university. And I said, but I have no idea what I want to study. How about I go and I shadow people, or I figure out what I would want to do. And that way, by the time I'm ready to go to university, I know what I'm going to study, and I won't be wasting my time. And my parents said, nice try, but you're going to university. So I said, okay.
Don't tell me they're not Russian. I'm kidding.
Well, my parents were, always acting in what they viewed as the best interest. And for that, I'm eternally grateful.
Okay.
kibbutz ve'em is one of the mitzvahs that I tried to have a kachin, and so my parents, I did something that was not very nice though at the time, which was, I really didn't want to go to university. So to spite my parents, which again is something one should never do, I only applied to one university, and that was Texas Tech University, way in the North Panhandle of Lubbock, 800 miles away, because I wanted it to be as far away from home as I could get while still being in state for in-state tuition. So to my dismay and to my parents' joy, I got in, and they told me, okay, we're sending you there to learn. We're not sending you there to party or to go to movies or to go out with friends or anything else. So if you want to have money for yourself, you're going to have to earn that yourself. And I took that and I said, okay, well, let me get a summer job. So I went and I got a summer job. I got roped into what's called a pyramid scheme, where basically people that get high school students to sell knives to their friends and family. It's called Cutco knives. They're actually really great knives. Just kidding. I'm not trying to sell you on them. But the knives themselves it's an international brand. They're actually sold in Costco. And I had gone to sales seminars, trainings, and the like. And in the summer, just before I had gone to university, I went to the sales seminar in Austin, Texas. And there, my friends and I were hungry for lunch. We left the training that day, and I had said, okay, where does everyone want to go? And they had said, we all made up our minds to go to a wings place. Not a kosher wings place, but nevertheless, we all pull up there, we walk in, and I see that as I walk in, there's a wall with names on it from top to bottom. And I'm asking, what is this wall and what are these names? And I'm told, this is our Hot Wings Challenge. And I say, okay, well, what does it entail? They said, well, if you can eat more than 4 of our hot wings, you'll get your name on this wall. And I said, okay, how hot can they be? And they said, well, you need to sign a waiver because one of our hot wings is the equivalent of eating 400 jalapenos in a single bite.
Wow.
So I being 18 years old and invincible, I dared my friends and my friends dared me back, and we all signed the waiver, and I took one bite, and I was in so much pain, no amount of milk or water could take away the amount of pain I was in.
Wow.
And a week later, I was still in a tremendous amount of pain. So I went to the doctor and I asked him what's going on. And the doctor took one look in my mouth and said, sir, you have 3rd-degree chemical burns in your mouth. We can see the flesh behind your cheeks and the veins underneath your tongue. And I said, what do I do? They explained to me, well, for the next month and a half or so, you're going to have to eat and drink only liquids and soft foods. So, mashed potatoes, yogurt, just like whatever kind of foods are soft, and then only liquids besides that. So for the next month, I took time to recover, and unbeknownst to me, I had contracted a very rare strain of mumps. Now I'll get to exactly what had happened. However, I had been born with a pre-existing, a genetic heart condition. And in high school, actually I should say throughout my entire life, I would be sitting down, hanging out, eating dinner, whatever, and all of a sudden my heart rate would shoot up to, from 80 over 120 to 140 over 160, like I was running from a bear. And wow. I thought this was normal. I never questioned it. This would happen to me a couple times a week for my whole life. In high school, I told my parents, I had my hand on my chest trying to calm myself down. And my parents asked me, what's going on there? And I explained to them, and I said, doesn't everybody get this? And they were like, no, we got to get that checked out. So I was diagnosed with inappropriate synodal tachycardia, which is IST, which is basically a benign heart condition, which means it's not dangerous, it's not deadly. The doctors had said at the time that I would live with it for the rest of my life, and that it's not a danger whatsoever. However, because I had eaten these extremely hot, spicy wings, and the lining of my mouth was completely burned away, the immune system inside of my mouth was compromised. And I had, unfortunately, I look at it now as being very fortunate. I had contracted an incredibly rare case of fatal mumps myocarditis. And essentially, The reason why it's called fatal is because nobody lives from it. Everybody dies from it, except for myself, as far as doctors can tell, which I have spoken to many, many, many doctors who have said that I am the first patient that they are aware of somebody having lived from fatal mumps myocarditis, and every single one has said that it's an absolute miracle. No one can describe or explain how or why I was able to live. It's completely a miracle from God. So in the weeks leading up to me going to university, I had a breakthrough case of this mumps. And essentially what this version of mumps does is it goes straight to the heart and it eats the heart. It replicates in the heart tissue and it eats the heart until Rahman al-Islam, God forbid, a person passes away. And there's no cure for it. It's really only discovered in autopsy, if it even is discovered at all. So I go to get ready to go to university. My parents drop me off at the university dorms, and I am bused by these huge buses from the university to a local super Target. And for those who might not know, super Target is just basically a Target that's the size of a mall. This one happened to be 2 stories, up and down, and it was like a department store for Target. So I walk in, and I wanted to go and pick out a DVD. At the time, I was wanting to watch a movie, and so I went over to the DVD section, and I'm standing in front of the DVD section, and all of a sudden, my legs go completely numb, and I cannot feel my legs. Now, it just so happened that the day before, I had done leg day at the gym. I was working out, trying very hard to make it onto the Texas Tech tennis team, and so I was working out consistently every day, and the day before was leg day, and I thought to myself, maybe I just overdid it. The next thing I start to feel, as I'm not feeling my legs, is that all of a sudden I have this sharp shooting sensation in my left arm. And I'm thinking to myself, that's so strange. I've had a pain in my right arm before, but never in my left arm from playing tennis. I'm right-handed, and I've had pain from my tendonitis, but never in my left arm. And then as I'm thinking that's so strange, I start to feel I'm having a massive migraine. Now, in this point in my life, I had never had a migraine before. I've had plenty of headaches, but never a migraine. And when I started feeling this, the sensation was like my brain was shrinking and squeezing from blood loss. And as I'm feeling this sensation, the last thing I start to feel is like someone is taking a little thumbtack, a little push pin, and sticking it into my heart every time my heart beats.
Ouch.
So I'm thinking to myself, the first thing that pops into my mind is heartburn. My grandfather always complained about heartburn. And I go over to the pharmacy counter and I am thinking to myself, he always took a Tums to get rid of heartburn. So I said, I'm in so much pain, I'm just going to go pull a Tums off the wall. I'll take one now and I'll pay for it at the register. I took it, opened it, ate it, and the pain intensified times 10. Now it feels like someone is driving a butcher's knife into my chest every time my heart beats. So at this point, I said, something's got to give. I went over to the pharmacist and I told her all my symptoms. And she takes one look at me and she says, I'm sorry, sir. You're going to have to go see a doctor. I cannot help you. And to her credit, I'm sure she was not thinking that an 18-year-old kid is having a heart attack in the middle of nowhere, Texas. So immediately, as soon as I hear the words, I'm sorry, sir, I cannot help you, I blacked out. My whole peripheral from the room went black, 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 black. Everything went black, and I hit the floor. The next thing I know, there's a super Target attendant standing over me, shaking me, saying, sir, are you all right? And I opened my eyes, and I said these exact words. I said, get me an ambulance. I am not going to die in a super Target.
You thought you were dying?
I knew I was dying. I could feel my body shutting down, and I'll explain what was going on exactly, but I could feel that my body was shutting down. The sensation was like someone was holding the power button on a computer, or like someone had pulled the plug. It was a knowledge in every aspect of my body that knew that I'm very close to death. So the super Target attendant pulls the red phone off the wall. At that point, I didn't know that it was for emergencies, but he pulls it off the wall. He dials 911, and I had just gone from playing a very high level of tennis to not being able to pick myself up off the floor to walk over to the ambulance. So they wheelchair me out to the ambulance, and I am in just an incredible amount of pain. From the ambulance ride to the hospital, the main thing I remember is being in a tremendous amount of pain, the most pain I have ever experienced in my entire life. The doctors, the paramedics were trying to get draw from my veins. However, they were not able to, and I had a cardiologist explain to me that it's because when the heart is not strong enough to keep pumping, the veins atrophy and they become like a vacuum, and you cannot suck blood through them. So they had to go through my hand. It was quite painful. But that was the least of the pain I was experiencing. They get me to the emergency room. They wheelchair me into the emergency room. On a gurney, and I'm begging, screaming, somebody please call my parents. A nurse stops by and says, "I'm sorry, sir. We cannot tell anyone where you are until we figure out what's going on with you. You're 18 years old, and you're no longer under the jurisdiction of your parents, and so we have to wait until we give you a diagnosis." I'm still screaming. I didn't care what you had to say. I said, I'm still screaming for my parents because I knew I was dying. From my from earshot, I could hear the doctor 7 times come out from the room adjacent and say, check his T levels again. He's 18 years old. There's no way he's having a heart attack. Check it again. Check it again. Check it again. I have it on my medical records right over here that they checked it 7 times. And just to give perspective, and I'm not expecting anyone to remember these numbers, but the heart replenishes heart cells at a very slow rate. Hashem is amazing. God creates and sustains the entire world constantly. And Hashem, God, is constantly recreating our body. Every 7 years, we are literally new people. The entirety of our body is completely replaced. The heart does this at a very healthy rate of letting go its dead tissue. And we know it because there's an enzyme that's released by the heart called troponin, a T cell. And this happens at a very healthy rate of 0.01 to 0.03 nanograms per milliliter. Very small amount. A heart attack is measured at 10 times that, at 0.3 nanograms per milliliter, and I was at 5.98.
Whoa.
So this is more than 20 times a heart attack, nearly 20 times a heart attack. And the doctors kept coming out, and eventually, after 7 times, they said, sure enough, he is having a massive heart attack, and his heart is deteriorating at an incredibly rapid rate.
You're conscious this whole time?
Yes, I'm conscious this whole time. Yes. There's no cure for fatal mumps myocarditis. There's no way to stop a heart attack and to get a virus out, right? A person has to weather it, and unfortunately, there's until I had lived through this, no one has ever weathered this virus. At 2 a.m, I'm wheeled into the intensive care unit, and the doctor comes into the room, picks up the phone, and calls my father and says, "You're going to want to come here. We do not think your son will live through tonight." Granted, although doctors are not the ones who make the calculation as to who, when, and where a person's time is to be taken, that is up to God. And if God says this person will live, it's not up to the doctors to say it, it's up to God to say it. However, to this doctor's credit, like I had said, B'teva, in nature, no one has yet lived from this virus besides myself up to this point. So my father sends my mother to be there bedside with me the next day. And 2 days later, on the 3rd day from the first heart attack that I had, I'm sitting in the intensive care unit, and I'm looking at a big clock in front of me. That's all they had. It's a university hospital in the middle of nowhere. Now, there were no televisions, just a big clock on the wall. And the clock read 1:25 in the afternoon. And I see this clock, and I start to feel my body is shutting down. More so than the first time when I was at Super Target, I knew I was dying. The sensation was like from head to toe, my entire body needed to let go and go to the bathroom all at once. I push the nurse's button. She comes into the room, and I tell her I'm about to have a second heart attack. She takes one look at me, and she says, "Sir, you're not allowed to diagnose yourself." And I said, "Ma'am, with all due respect, I've already had 1 heart attack, and I know what it feels like, and I'm about to have another." She calls in the doctor. They start looking at my vital signs, and my mother's holding my hand next to me. And at this moment, in a single instance, I felt this is it. This is the moment of death. In the moment of death, it was incredibly blissful. However, it was a coin, and there were 2 sides to this coin. In the moment of death, there was no pain. The pain didn't necessarily disappear physically, but the body was letting go of the pain, the physical pain. And that was euphoric in a sense. There was no fear of death itself. The fear was not of death. Rather, the opposite side of that coin was I was incredibly afraid and incredibly pained. What do I mean? The fear and the pain was the recognition that I would never be able again to tell another person, I love you. I would never again be able to go and to correct a mistake I had made in a relationship, or to correct a behavior, or to correct anything. The books on my life were left open and unattended and unfinished. And it was incredibly painful and incredibly scary to say, this is the moment, this is it. And I do not know, or I will not be able to make those amends. In a single instance, although I had never in my life said Kriya Shema al Hamita, the Shema that we say before bed, I immediately had a reflex, a knee-jerk reaction to death. And I said these exact words. I said, I hereby forgive anyone who has ever done anything wrong to me. And I ask forgiveness for anyone I ever did anything wrong to. Now, this is almost verbatim what we say in the first paragraph of the bedtime Shema. I didn't know the bedtime Shema, but my soul did. And as soon as I said the words, I hereby forgive anyone and everyone, and I ask for forgiveness, I heard the most beautiful, heavenly, motherly voice call out from way above the ceiling, and it said, "You're forgiven," just like that.
With your ears, you heard like intuition, or like your ears? Like what kind of hearing?
No, it was the clearest voice I have ever heard here in this physical world. It was incredibly clear. It was like hearing you speak to me now, but way clearer, because it wasn't just through a phone and in one direction. The sound was omnidirectional, although I knew it was coming from Lamaila, and I knew it was coming from above. I saw the direction it was coming from. I heard it, and the voice, it was like hearing a voice. Imagine if someone was speaking to you inside of your brain. I mean, it's very strange to describe it like that.
You talk to yourself.
It's like, but even louder, because it's like talking to yourself, but you're hearing it from another source. And so it's very loud, but it wasn't obnoxious. It was beautiful. It was sweet. It was pleasant, and it was motherly. So I heard this voice call out, and it said, "You are forgiven," just like that. And as soon as I heard the words, "You are forgiven," I found myself standing at the top corner of the room like a security camera, and I'm looking down at my body, and I'm seeing my mother holding my hand next to me, the doctor and the nurse walking around me. I see the clock ticking on the wall. I can see through walls. I saw patients and doctors in other parts of the hospital. And I go over to my mother and I tell her, "I love you and goodbye." In my mind's eye, I think of my father, and immediately I'm 800 miles away in front of him at work at NASA. And I tell him, "I love you and goodbye." I think of my two younger sisters, and I'm immediately in front of them at school. And I tell them, "I love you and goodbye." I'm back in the hospital room, and I look up on the ceiling, and I see a huge white swirling hurricane of fire above me. And it pulls me up like an elevator. And I look up through the ceiling, and I go through a floor, another floor. And I look down, and I'm going through a ceiling, another ceiling, another ceiling. And I exit the hospital building, and the hospital building starts to become smaller. And the town of Lubbock, Texas starts to become smaller. So as a Texan, I never thought it could happen. The state of Texas starts to get smaller. The United States, planet Earth. And I look around, and I see stars, planets, galaxies, nebulas. No amount of Hubble telescope, James Webb telescope, no telescope photo could do justice to what I saw over there. Being in front of God's creations of stars that literally make our sun look like a grain of sand, when the earth looks like a grain of sand next to the sun, is indescribable. And I'm passing very rapidly through the cosmos, and the experience itself was like a vacation. It was beautiful, it was serene, it was peaceful. It was better than laying in a hammock in Cancun. And I'm begging this elevator of fire, "Please drop me off. I love this place. This is the best vacation I've ever had. Please drop me off right here." The elevator's not listening. The elevator climbs higher and higher and higher. And I look down, and I see the elevator extends all the way down to my body. And I look up, and I see the elevator extends to a place I cannot yet see. The elevator does not stop, and I realize, okay, I'm not going to be able to stop the elevator. So I try to take in all of these experiences. I'm trying to absorb and internalize what I'm seeing. When you look out into the night sky, what do you see? Stars, planets, galaxies, and in between that, it's the pitch black void of space. The speed of light on the scale of Earth is very fast. You turn the lights on, and the whole room immediately becomes illuminated. But the speed of light on the scale of the universe is incredibly slow. It takes light from the sun 8 minutes to get to Earth. It takes light from the closest galaxy over, our neighbor Andromeda. It takes light. Age of the universe is another discussion, but it takes light 1 million years traveling to get to Earth. So light is very, very slow on the scale of the universe. The elevator reaches a place where light has not yet reached, and the entire space is dark, pitch black void of space. It was empty, it was cold, and I didn't like it. I told the elevator, get me out of here. This place is scary. But the elevator, the same as the first time, kept climbing higher and higher and higher at the same exact rate with no change. I'm trying to calm myself down, and as I'm trying to calm myself down, eventually the elevator breaks through this place of pure darkness, and it comes to a place of pure light. It passes this curtain, this wall, and it comes to a place of pure light in every direction. There was no source of light. It was warm, and it was nice and inviting, and I loved it. It was even greater than the first place. And I told the elevator even stronger, please drop me off right here. I love this place. I love this space. The elevator again did not listen, and it kept climbing higher and higher and higher. And I realized for a second time, the elevator is not going to stop. So for a second time, I am trying to internalize this experience of warmth, of light, of calmness. And eventually the elevator breaks through another wall, another ceiling, another curtain, and it comes to a place, now a final destination, where light and dark are the exact same thing, and there's no difference between the two. Now, people have asked me, what does that look like? And I cannot physically describe it, but imagine for a moment that you're in a pitch black room and you cannot see your hand in front of your face. Now imagine that the lights get turned on and you can see the whole room for what it is. Go back to the lights being pitch black, but you can still see everything. The darkness doesn't stop you from seeing. It helps you to see just like light does. And that's kind of what it was like. I get to this place, and my first reaction is to go like this. Hands. Where are my hands? I don't see any hands. Feet. Where are my feet? No feet. I try to feel a body. No body. I look around. I don't see anything or anyone in any direction, and the power of sight doesn't stop. I can see infinitely in all directions. I could also see 360 all the way around me. I tried to start walking, and I tried to take a step. That was my first reaction, was to try to start walking. And as soon as I took a step, a very short distance, a few feet, immediately I was there. And I was taken aback by that. And I thought, how strange. Let me try to take another step. This time, a mile in front of me. I tried to take a step, and immediately I'm there. Again, I was taken aback. And for a third time, I tried to take one last step. This time, a great distance in front of me, as far as my eye could see, like 5 miles in front of me. And I tried to take a step, and immediately I'm there. At this point, I was immediately overwhelmed with the sensation and knowledge that I have been in this place before, and my entire life of 18 years felt like 5 minutes, and I realized that I was in this place just before I was born. Immediately in that moment of recognition, I was overwhelmed with the greatest sense of love, patience, kindness, forgiveness, and tranquility. And as soon as I experienced all of this, I found myself standing in the presence of my Father, in the presence of my Creator, in front of God. As I came to this realization that here I am standing in front of God, I realized that this whole space and place that I thought was empty is really all God. And immediately my recognition allowed me to see the face of God in every direction, everywhere. And not just there, I realized that my whole life of 18 years was also a direct dance and song with God face to face, and I didn't realize it. And so now here I am in front of my Father, and I got this sensation, this feeling, this internalization that my Father is calling me and speaking with me and asking me, son, we need to have a conversation. In that exact moment, I reached out and I said in English, is this my time to leave? And immediately I received an answer back in Hebrew, Lamed Aleph, lo, no. And as soon as I heard the word lo, now I didn't speak Hebrew then, and I still don't speak Hebrew now, but like I had said before, I knew enough Hebrew to know that Ken is yes and lo is no, and Ani Baruch, my name is Baruch, and Shabbat Shalom, and so I knew a few Hebrew phrases here and there. The word lo I heard, and immediately I was, with all of my senses together, wrapped into one. And so as soon as I heard the word lo, which, by the way, the word lo was, I mean, it was unlike anything that I could possibly physically describe. As soon as I had heard the word lo, immediately I could, my seeing and my hearing and my smelling and tasting, all of my senses were combined into one. And so as soon as I heard the word lo, I saw a massive lamed and a massive aleph painted in what looked like white lights breaking through the letters. The word lo was the size of a skyscraper. It was huge in front of me. And it was in the language of Kel, of Rachamim, of mercy. Essentially, I didn't know it then. I had only come to learn later that other people have had near-death experiences, and other people report going before Beis Din Shel Maila, the court of judges above. However, a person is only liable to the court of earth and to the heavenly court at the age of 20. I was 18 at the time, so I was being judged by my father alone. So I see the word lo. The word lo starts to come closer and closer and closer to me. It becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, and it places itself into my right hand. And I see that the word loy turns itself into 7 things simultaneously. First off, it was the word lo. Second, it turned into, for lack of better words, a little crystal ball, a little sphere, a little olam, a little world of my life. And I look into this little world and I see 5 things simultaneously. I see a little person who is me inside of a little temple, inside of a little mishkan, a little Beis Hamikdash, next to a little menorah of fire, a little tree of life, and in front of a little golden scale. On the front of this golden scale were listed all of the mitzvahs that I knew about. Kibbud Av V'Em, honoring my father and mother, tzedakah, charity, avos reim, loving my fellow man, gimilos chasadim, acts of kindness, and Hanukkah. And these were the things that were listed on the front. On the back of the scale were listed all of the mitzvot that I did not know about. Tefillin, tzitzis, kashrus, Shabbos, Pesach, Sukkot, you name it. A mitzvah that I didn't know about, and it was listed there. The scale immediately showed me a video, a movie of my life as I had lived it, from the moment I was born to the moment I came to this place and every moment in between. I saw everything I ever said, thought, and did for my whole life. My whole life was played out like a movie. However, the movie was like a thriller. It was very scary to watch. Why? Because every time I did something good, the side of good on the scales got weighed. And every time I did something not so good, the side of not so good got weighed. And back and forth, I'm watching everything I'm thinking, speaking, and doing for my entire life. Now, Baruch Hashem, at the end of 18 years, I didn't do that much damage, and there was more good than not. However, not only were the good things that I did counted for me, I didn't know that water is kosher. I didn't know that I had to say a blessing on water. However, water is kosher. And every bit of water that I drank, every Coke that I had that was kosher, it was all counted for me on the side of good. And it weighed very heavily. I made it a game in high school to get people to smile. People often walked around looking like they were in a prison of sorts, and people were, not so happy. So I made it a game in high school to smile at people, tell jokes, give compliments. And I saw that every smile that I gave to another person, whether Jew or non-Jew, even more especially, there was something weighed for me on the side of good. Simcha was weighed tremendously on the side of good. And Baruch Hashem, at the end of 18 years, there was more good than not. Now, the word loy comes then from my right hand to my left.
You saw you had a body. I'm saying, and that envision. You saw hands.
No, so I could not see hands, but just because I could not see doesn't mean I couldn't feel. I felt like, even though, like, let's say, imagine your hand is invisible. I feel like I'm doing, this. I feel like I
Right.
to control myself. I just don't see anything. I feel like I can walk around, or like I have a head and everything. I just don't see it. So, although I did not see a hand, it felt as though my hands were like this, and the word loy placed itself into my right
Right.
hand and then into my left. The word loy then turns itself again into 7 things. Again, it was the word loy. It was another crystal ball, but this time it was in a state of infinity. It was myself and a little base of Migdash and a little menorah of fire and a little tree of life and a little golden scale in infinity. It was a set of infinite possibilities of how I could have lived my life, from the worst possible life I could have lived to the best possible life I could have lived, and every potential in between. So these 2 movies, these 2 videos, these 2 loys, these 2 experiences fly to either side of me. And for lack of better words, I get turned into what feels like a little soccer ball. And I'm kicked and I'm flung and I'm shown, here's the life I lived. Here's something good that I did. And I'm kicked and I'm flung and I'm shown, here's how I could have done that thing worse. I'm kicked and I'm flung and I'm shown, here's something not so good that I did. And I'm kicked and I'm flung and I'm shown, here's how I could have done that thing better. For every moment in my life, I was made to testify in front of God, in front of my Father, how I could have done things better or worse, and how and why I did what I did. Now, yes, granted, the mitzvahs that I did, the good deeds that I did were amazing, and it was very special. And in fact, I saw that the things that I had done that were not good had an end to them, while the good deeds and the mitzvahs had no end. They continued to make ripple effects in the world forever. However, even one time, not listening to my Father and going against him deliberately, where I knew it was wrong, was incredibly embarrassing. The most embarrassment I have ever experienced in my entire life. I cannot possibly physically describe to you the level of embarrassment because it was huge. It's like coming to my Father and saying, Father, you asked me not to do X, Y, and Z deliberately. And you told me to go and do A, B, and C specifically. And I didn't listen to any of it, even one time. Now, for the things that I had apologized for and the things that I had done tshuva for, those things were not counted at all. But for the things that I had left undone and that I had just allowed to continue being, those were the things that I had to testify for. I was redder than a cherry tomato, red from embarrassment, burning from embarrassment from head to toe. And I'm feeling myself, I'm crying a puddle of tears, quite literally in a pool of my own tears. And I turned to Hashem as I'm almost submerged in my own tears. And I asked God, how can I make this any better? Look at all of the things that I've done that were so damaging. And immediately, God comforted me by taking away everything and rolling out in front of me a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll written on black fire letters and white fire parchment. Now, this black fire letters and white fire parchment was the entire Torah as it is written down here on earth. And I have never read the entire Torah written down here on earth. As I had mentioned before, I had read Parshas Kiseitze, and that was it, one of the shortest portions. But my soul knew the entire Torah perfectly. I was able to read from the base of Breshis to the Lamed Devene Kol Yisrael, and I knew the entire Torah perfectly. And as soon as I finished reading the Torah, it came up in front of me, and it said, I am the Torah, do you accept me? And immediately I said, yes, I accept you, Torah. And the Torah came and it wrapped itself around me like a talus, and it gave me a hug. And I saw that it was making a ring around me, and that I was being married to God through the Torah and through the mitzvah. I saw behind me, at the end of the Torah wedged itself into the beginning, and the last letter Lamed came together with the first letter Beis, and it made the word Lev. Now, I didn't know at that point in time that the word Lev meant heart, but the word Loi was the first word I saw, the word Lev was the second word I saw, and the two are only one letter apart. The word Lev showed me, again, another 7 things. It was the word Lev, and a crystal ball, and a menorah of fire, and a base of Migdash, and a little person, and a time, a tree of life, and a little golden scale. And I saw in there the rest of my future. God showed me my heart would be healed. He would allow me to continue living the rest of my life until 180 years, God willing. And I saw myself coming here into this world and coming back. I saw myself becoming observant and going back to university and meeting my wife and having children, God willing, and grandchildren. And I remember my entire life. And as soon as I see this movie of the rest of my future, I turned to God and I said, this is such a beautiful life. I want it. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. How do I accept it? And immediately God said, the scales that you are being shown, the Maiznaim, are for you to go back to tip your scales to the side of good, to help other people tip their scales to the side of good. That will tip the scales of the whole world and bring Mashiach. Now, I was told, as soon as I asked, how do I accept it? The entire experience was taken up by God, and he wrote up with me a 5-point contract. Now, God is a very kind lawyer. He's on our side. So the fine print was the title of the contract. And the title of the contract said, if I do not immediately accept the contract without any hesitation whatsoever, that's it, game over. My life's done. I'm going back with Hashem, and my life is over. If, however, I choose to accept the contract, I must know that it is not the air I breathe, the sleep I get, or the food I eat that keeps me alive, that rather it's these 5 things. Point number 1, Hashem said, Ana nafshi kisavis yahavis. The first words of the 10 commandments are Anaichi. It's an acronym. And it means God says, I wrote my soul into the Torah. You must have a relationship with me through the Torah. Point number 2, it cannot just be an intellectual relationship. I have to live the mitzvahs. Hashem said, you must be from. God did not say you need to be a Sephardic Jew or an Ashkenaz Jew or an Ashkefardic Jew. Okay, maybe I made the last one up. But God did not say you need to be Litvish or Haredi or Chabad. He said you need to be from. Point number 3 is more important than my own Torah learning and my own mitzvah doing is Ahavas Yisrael. And in fact, if I'm learning Torah properly and I'm doing mitzvahs properly, then I'm going to have love for another Jew properly. Point number 4, I'm not allowed to keep this story to myself. So thank you, Lechatchila Reber Podcast, for and helping me to fulfill point number 4 and to all those of you who are watching and listening. Point number 5 is the bottom line of the whole contract said, 4 words, Moyach, the mind, Shalit, sits, Al, on top, Halev, of the heart. And the word Lev, the word that represented the rest of my life, came to the bottom of the contract and it plugged itself into the contract. And it said, your mind sits over your heart. You must know, you want your heart to be healed? You must know that yes, you're allowed to experience anger, frustration, pain, sadness, sorrow, but no, you cannot act out of those emotions. You must use your brain to control your heart and to act out of patience, restraint, kindness, and love. And as soon as I saw that, I put my hand to the signature line. The imprint of my hand, Neshama's hand, was my signature. And I was told, look down. I look down and I see my body on the hospital bed. I was told, open your eyes. I opened my eyes, and faster than I went up, I was back down in my body. Now, I was in such a state of shock. It was like a bomb had gone off that I didn't eat, speak, or sleep for 24 hours. And anyone who knows me knows it's quite strange for me not to do any one of those things in any 24-hour given period of time. So during this period of time, my brain was ping-ponging back and forth in my mind. Half of me is saying, God is the boogeyman upstairs, if he does exist. And even if he exists, you only pray to him during exams. God, please help me pass this test. And the Torah is just some book written a long time ago. And the mitzvahs are just good deeds. And the other half of me is saying, no. Ki haim chayenu uvardich yamenu, Hashem is your life. The mitzvahs are your life. The Torah is your life. And for 24 hours, I literally felt like a crazy person. I was the first person not to accept or believe this entire experience. And after 24 hours, I said to myself, I'm going to forget this ever happened. However,
so how long was this whole experience, by the way? How long was the actual
asking? So when I opened my eyes back up, the clock said 1:43 in the afternoon. It had been 18 minutes exactly from the time I left to the time I came back. And I was 18 years old at the time. And it felt, I had seen myself live 18 years, 10 times. So it felt like I lived many lifetimes of 18 over and over and over and over again. Of course, the first time was 18 of my life as it was. The second 18 was my life as it could have been. And the third was 180 of the rest of my future as it can be.
How do you get to 180?
The future, the rest of my life as it can be, I was shown the rest of my life until 180 years. So I was shown 180 years. I opened my eyes back up and I see the clock says 1:43 in the afternoon. It had been 18 minutes exactly from the time I had left to the time I came back. And inside of those 18 minutes felt like an eternity, felt like many lifetimes. So 2 weeks later, I had one more heart attack for a total of 3 heart attacks that were viral induced. And I had about 30% of my heart left over. 70% of my heart was eaten by this virus. And Baruch Hashem, they had released me from the hospital, and it took me 3.5 years, but I made a full recovery. As soon as I had woken up from this experience, I was the first person not to believe it. And I said to myself, I'm going to forget this ever happened. But I had 2 very big problems. Problem number 1, I signed a contract. Problem number 2, I had a recurring dream that night and for the next 180 nights that I relived the entire experience in full every night as a recurring dream. And every night that I went to sleep, it felt like I was waking up to real life, like Hashem, Torah, mitzvahs, this is real life. And every day that I would wake up, it felt like I was falling asleep, like being in this world without Torah, without mitzvahs, without Hashem, somehow some kind of dream. It says in Tehillim that when Mashiach comes, we will have been like dreamers, because being alive in a world where we don't see God open and revealed, it feels like a dream. So I'm trying to run away from this. They released me from the hospital, and for 6 months, for 180 nights, I'm running away. 180 days, I'm running away from this recurring dream. And by the way, that's why I can express it and tell it over so clearly, is because I relived it 180 nights for 6 months, every night in full. And so after running away for 6 months, what did I do? I did something no yid should do. I turned to drinking. I turned to illicit substances. I turned to partying. I turned to things that are really not for anyone. And I never grew up that way. It was really, truly acting out because I had no idea how else to deal with this. And after 180 nights of running away, 180 days of running away, eventually I landed myself in jail because of illegal substances. My father came to bail me out of jail, and he was livid with me as he should have been. And I came out of jail and I said to myself, I cannot live my life this way. This is very destructive. So I'm going to accept that it's possible that that experience and this life are both real. And as soon as I accepted that, I stopped having the recurring dream. So I said to myself, it must mean that I must look back into my Judaism. I go to the conservative rabbi and I ask the rabbi, what does Judaism have to say about life after death? And he says, we don't know. Immediately, my Yetzer Hara was like, yes, you're done. You don't have to do anything more. Go live your life, play tennis, do whatever you want to do. No more Judaism. That's it. You look back into it. However, I went to work for NASA doing an internship and eventually got to work for them full time during that time period when I was making a recovery. And after 3.5 years, I made a full recovery. Baruch Hashem. Not only have I been cleared to exercise, no scar tissue. Doctors cannot tell that I had 1 heart attack, much less 3. I have not had in the last 12 years a single episode of IST, of inappropriate sinodal tachycardia. So not only did God heal me and my heart from fatal mumps myocarditis, which Baruch Hashem, I guess for me was, only half fatal. I came back. And in addition to that, God healed me from this inappropriate sinodal tachycardia, this IST. So if something's not working, turn it off and on again. It's just a joke. But specifically, after 3.5 years, I made a full recovery and I said, okay, well, I need to go back to university. I've got to get a degree eventually. So I go to Texas A&M University, and the shluchim, the Chabad on campus shluchim, are reaching out to me day after day, month after month, and even year after year. A year and a half, I ran away from them. I was at Hillel playing guitar and doing other things on Friday night. And eventually, Hillel had a back to semester, back to the school year Shabbat, and they made the grave mistake of not having enough food. I had friends that said, "Hey, you should come to Chabad since Hillel doesn't have food." And unfortunately, Hillel didn't know that was the end of my tenure there. So I go to Chabad for the first time in my entire life, and so I stepped foot into their Chabad house for the first time. And for the first time in my entire life, I remember the video of the rest of my life as it can be. I remember walking into the Chabad house. I remember who was going to walk into the room, who was going to walk out of the room. I remembered hearing the conversations people were having. I remembered the way the tables were set up like a ches. I remember the rabbi and the rebbitzin sitting at the head. I remember the whole scene perfectly. And so I walk in, I wait for everyone to leave, and I said l'chaim with them. I drank a couple beers, and I told them everything I just told you. They're looking at each other, smiling. They look back at me, they're smiling, and they tell me, Tanya chapter 8. And I said, who chapter what? They said, yeah, your experience is described by the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, in the 8th chapter of the founding book of Chabad philosophy, the Tanya. And I said, I don't believe you. And with all the gusto in the world, Rabbi gets up, runs over to the shelf, pulls lessons in Tanya, opens it up to the 8th chapter, and sure enough, what does it say? Kafakela. What happens to a yid when they die? They see their life as it was, their life as it could have been, and the pain and the difference between the two is embarrassing, and it's cleansing for the soul. I read that, and I immediately said, whoa, whoa, whoa. What's Chabad? Who's the Alter Rebbe? Where did you come from? How do you know any of this? And they said, we love your questions. You must sign up for JLI, Sinai Scholars. So I joined Sinai Scholars, and after 3 or 4 classes of keeping them up till 2 in the morning with literal notebooks of questions that I had, eventually they said, we cannot be your only source of information. We love your questions, but you must go to yeshiva. And I said, what's that? What's yeshiva? They said, don't worry. You'll come with us on Birthright Israel. You'll go to Mayinot Yeshiva, and you'll experience it for yourself. So I said, great, sign me up. I stepped foot off on the plane into Eretz Yisrael, into Eretz Kodesh, and immediately I remember from the video of the rest of my life as it can be, being in Eretz Yisrael. I remember the paintings on the wall in Mayinot. I remember the books. I remember the teachers. I remember the students. I remember the books thrown everywhere. And I walk in, and people ask me, what are you doing here? And I said, everything I just told you. I explained to them my whole life story. And they said everyone was blown away, but they were quite skeptical. They had never heard of such a thing. And so I asked, what am I doing here? And they said, don't worry, your first class is tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m., Chassidus. I said, what's that? They said, just go. So I walk into my first class of Chassidus ever in my entire life. And what is the class about? What happens to a Jew when they die? Amazing Hashgacha Pratis. God guides the world in such an amazing way. And where is this information? Where is this knowledge? It's in the Maim Rabim, and the Maimer, they were going through Maim Rabim, which is a Maimer about how we struggle with physicality, with making a parnasa, making a living in this world, and how it leads us directly to our relationship with Hashem. The Maimer was in the 3rd chapter, and they were going point by point in the Maimer, line by line, but they were also going footnote by footnote, tracking in the Maimer. I walked into the class where they had left off on a footnote, and they had not yet gotten to that footnote. The class started on a footnote, and the entire class almost was on that footnote. What footnote was it? It was a footnote at the end of the 3rd chapter that discusses what happens to a Jew when they die. It brings an Alter Rebbe that brings from Torah or in Parshas Devarim, where the Alter Rebbe brings an Arizal, and the Arizal says a Jew when they die sees their life as it was, their life as it could have been. They're made to read the Torah, and they go on to do whatever else they need to do. I read that, I heard that, and immediately I broke down crying tears of joy. I said, I'm not a crazy person. Up until this point, I thought I was insane. And I walk out of the classroom and I turned to God and I said, Hashem, Eibishter, I don't understand you. Torah and mitzvahs, I don't understand you. Rebbe, I don't get it. But Nasa v'nishma. I'll start doing it. Let's see what happens. At that time, I was putting on tefillin and tzitzis. I said, okay, I'm going to start keeping Shabbos and kashrus to the greatest extent, and shomer negia and all the chagim and whatever mitzvah I would learn about. I started keeping it. I come back home to university and I go to Pegisha. My parents see I come back with a beard, and they said, whoa. We love that you're enjoying learning and that you're growing, but aren't you going a little bit too fast? And I said to them, you don't understand. I'm not going fast enough. Torah mitzvahs, this is it. This is life. And I go to Pegisha, and I'm standing in the foyer of Oile Torah, and I'm with a bunch of other college students in a room of like 80 college students in the front. And I didn't know that this is how the yeshiva recruits, but I heard a very booming voice of Rabbi Hecht, hey, you. And I turn around and I go, who, me? And he says, yes, you. And so he runs over to me with all the excitement in the world. And I wanted to match his level of excitement. So he runs over to me and he says, what are you doing this winter break? And I said, I don't know. And so he goes, great, you're coming to yeshiva. And I said, okay. So he shoves the clipboard in my face. He's like, name, number, credit card information, we'll sign you up now. And so I signed everything. And he's like, okay, you're coming. And I said, but I'm going back to Texas tomorrow. He said, don't worry, we'll get your plane ticket. You're coming back. So I come back with a winter break program. I walk into yeshiva, and I remembered the yeshiva. I remembered learning in yeshiva. I remembered being in yeshiva. And I went back to university after winter break. And anytime, any chance I got, spring break, winter break, summer break, if there was a 3-day President's Day weekend, I was booking a ticket and I was in yeshiva. In 2019, I ended my studies at university to go to yeshiva full time. And I went and I learned in yeshiva until March of 2020 when they kicked me out. But not just me, they kicked everybody out for COVID. And I'm sitting in Zal in the main study hall, in the back of the study hall. I'm learning Rambam, and it's late, and I'm finishing up Rambam, and I have a flight out the next day. I still have to pack up my dorm room. And I see 3 yeshiva students from the high school upstairs, 3 Bachrim, come in through the front door. And they bust in and they're going from person to person to person, bouncing around saying, hey, can we get a ride? Can we get a ride? Can we get a ride? And everybody's telling them, no, 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 no. And eventually I see they're about to walk over to me. And I'm thinking to myself, what's my excuse? What's my reason to say no? Well, immediately I said, it's late at night and I'm learning Rambam and I have a flight out the next day and I still have to pack up my dorm room and I need to get a good night's rest. So I was like, those are great reasons. And I said, what's more? Well, I don't have a car. That's a pretty good reason. I don't have extra cash for tolls or whatever. That's a pretty good reason. And as they're coming over to me, my contract comes up in front of me. And it says, more important than your own Torah learning, than your own mitzvah doing is loving another Jew, is obviously Israel. So I dropped all my other previous thoughts and I said, if you can get me a car, I'll take you. Our neighbor very kindly lent us his Toyota Corolla. And a Toyota Corolla with 3 Bachrim in their whole dorm room because they're leaving for COVID is a clown car. They had boxes stacked to the top. The trunk was completely full. One of them plays keyboard for bar and bas mitzvahs, and so there was a keyboard coming through the central console of the car. And I'm off to the side driving like this, and there's, boxes thrown all over the dashboard. I had a little window in front of me to see where I was going, and one of them was trying to get to an airport 30 minutes away, and he was supposed to be there 2 hours ago. And his flight was leaving in 50 minutes. So I had to put my pedal to the metal, and I'm not very proud to say it now that I had to do that, but I got him there in time. And Baruch Hashem, he made it to his flight back to England. And the last 2 guys, I dropped them off in 5 towns. Now, it's almost midnight, and I'm helping them in with all their stuff. And the last guy, his parents come out and said, wait a second, you dropped what you were doing. You drove him here. You're helping him with the stuff. The least you could do is come in from Alav Malka for the meal after Shabbat. And I said, sure, yeah, fine. Thank you. So I come in, I'm schmoozing with the family, and I'm seeing that the eldest daughter is hiding behind a book like this, and she's peeking her head in and out like this. And I'm thinking to myself, whatever, Jews, New York, people stare, people watch, no big deal. So I thought nothing of it. There was a sushi restaurant that was open at midnight, still like 15 minutes away from them in 5 towns. Jews are awesome in that way. And so I went to the sushi shop. I then went to the Ohel, and I went there to pray for a shidduch. And I went there because I wanted to utilize the opportunity. I was leaving back to Texas, and the Ohel is only 15 minutes away, and I had a car. So I went to the Ohel. I davened. I prayed that I should find the other half of my soul. And I fly back to Texas, and I thought nothing of this whole experience. 2 months later, my Rebbetzin, Manya Lazarev, calls me up, and she says, hey, there's a shidduch opportunity for you. And I said, really? From where? She said, remember the guy you took home? I said, yeah. She said, well, his sister heard the way you laughed and immediately thought of someone for you. And I said, just from a laugh? I've got to meet this girl. So because it was COVID, we were trying to work out how I was going to meet her and where and when. And eventually, on June 22nd, 2020, this was Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, I flew there to meet her in person. She opened the door, and I immediately knew it was her, my wife. I remembered her from the video of The Rest of My Life as It Can Be, and I remembered an entire lifetime with her. Now, she opened the door, and I didn't immediately tell her this. I didn't want her to run away. I didn't want her to know I'm a crazy person. And so I kept my mouth shut until the third date. However, because I wanted to be honest, I had disclosed on my shidduch profile that I had this medical complication, but now I'm fine. It's all good now. I'm cleared to exercise, work out, no problems, no issues whatsoever. So she asks me about it, and I told her everything I just told you, except she asked me, well, then you must have seen who your wife was, or you must have seen your wedding day. And I said, well, actually, yes, but I didn't want to freak her out, so I said she was behind the veil, so I couldn't see her face, And 3 weeks later, I go back home to Houston, and she calls me up and she says, hey, didn't you see after your wedding day too? So come on, tell me who it is. And I said, yeah, it's you. And she didn't run away. Baruch Hashem, I normally I say Exhibit A, but my wife Baruch Hashem did not run away. And we got married on Hey Teves. After we got married, I wanted to know how long had it been from the moment I met her to the moment we got married. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that it was 180 days exactly from the moment I met her to the moment we got married.
Wow. Now,
Baruch Hashem, I have had many, many, many experiences l'mayla min hateva of lechatchila ariber. And so if I could have one message that the lechatchila ariber podcast audience should walk away with, it is that I want to give you a blessing that for every challenge that comes your way, you should find a way to go lechatchila ariber. Whether that means turning to Torah for answers, turning to the Torah's light and guidance for answers, turning to Chassidus for answers, or whether that means going and doing a mitzvah, being proactive about doing good deeds. And even if, God forbid, a challenge arises, that you should have everything you need to be able to experience open and revealed good in all matters and to go lechatchila riber.
Amen, amen. Well, thank you so much.
Chaim, thank you for having me, and thank you to all of your viewers for watching. My heart gives you a direct blessing for open and revealed good, and you should have your heart's desire for the good.
Okay.
Kol tov.
See you there. Yeah, thank you so much.
A pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Lechatchila Arira podcast. Subscribe to us on YouTube and leave us a follow on Spotify. If you enjoyed this episode, please smash that like button and leave us a 5-star review.